It sounded so wonderful. Let's defund the police. They're responsible for all these terrible things. Well, we've gotten them defunded. Thousands of police are quitting the job. They can't stand it. But now we're seeing brutal murders in broad daylight and little children as young as 2 years old caught in the crossfire. Violent crime is surging across America. And this skyrocketing rise has become a huge political issue. So how has it put the Democrats in serious peril? Jenna Browder takes a look.
From coast to coast, violent crime is rising in American cities. In just one recent weekend, more than 120 Americans were killed in shootings. In New York, police want to talk to this man about a terrifying shooting in the Bronx. A 10-year-old and her little brother caught in the crossfire last week.
I want to acknowledge the young lady that pretty much saved her brother. She pretty much covered him up. In another part of New York, family and friends remembered Justin Wallace, a 10-year-old shot and killed in what police think was an argument among adults over parking. I'm gonna let it shine. And in Detroit, a vigil for a 2-year-old killed last week.
Not only is the violence affecting adults, but right now the violence is affecting children, and children are innocent. They should not be pulled into this at all.
It's a pattern across the country. Homicide rates in large cities rose more than 30% on average last year and climbed another 24% for the beginning of this year. The issue of rising crime has quickly become a political one, as seen in a recent survey by YouGov. Asked which issues were very big problems, 49% of Americans placed violent crime at the top of the list, compared to 39% for the economy and COVID coming in at just 32%. Conservatives and Republicans blame Democratic leadership in big cities and movements like defund the police. And they're likely to use it as election fodder in next year's midterms. Hoping to get ahead of what could be serious political peril for his party, President Biden is launching an effort to head off violent crime. His anti-crime strategy focusing on gun crimes and homicides. And regarding the defund the police movement, a recent report commissioned by Democrats shows the effort hurt the party, which lost a lot of ground in the House in 2020. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
It's like a tidal wave that's moving against the Democrats. People are just fed up with this woke philosophy. They're fed up with the fact that violent crime is not being prosecuted. They're fed up with the fact that the police are being defunded. City after city after city, violent crime is taking over, and in almost every single one of them, they're Democrat-controlled cities. And so the Democrats are going to have to bear the brunt. And I'm telling you, if we live long enough to see the next election in terms of Congress, there's going to be a tidal wave of anger against what's being imposed on the American people. Well, in other news, the Biden administration is, quote, an affront to evangelicals on every single thing that they stand and represent. Well, that's what former President Donald Trump said in an exclusive interview with CBN News' John Jessup.
Well, Pat, the former president made his remarks actually to CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody. He also talked about the crisis at the border, Trump's own views on his own Supreme Court nominees, and their decision last week upholding Obamacare, and his own political future. Here's a look at that interview.
He may not sit in the Oval Office anymore, but Donald Trump still packs a political punch. His supporters remain faithfully behind him and are hoping he'll make another run at the presidency.
What would have that impact on your decision? What's going through your mind on that? A lot of people want to know.
Well, I think I'm just looking at what's going on. I'm very unhappy with what's going on. I look at the border where people are coming in by the millions. It's going to be by the millions very soon. It already is. And I look at other things, how our country is really, it's America last. I was America first. I look at it and I see what's happening, and I'm not happy about it. So we'll make that decision, and I think people will be very happy with the decision I make.
Also in the 2024 conversation on the Republican side, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
There's a lot of people talking about Ron DeSantis and the job he's doing in Florida. What are your thoughts about DeSantis running in 2024? What do you think of that?
I think Ron's very good. I endorsed him, and when I endorsed him, he went up like a rocket ship. He understands that, and he's doing a good job. We have a number of people that are doing a very good job. Ron's a friend of mine. He's been great.
What hasn't been great in Trump's mind is a recent decision by two of the Supreme Court justices that he nominated. Both Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh voted to save Obamacare.
Disappointed, and that's the way it goes. Very disappointed. I fought very hard for them, but I was very disappointed with a number of their rulings.
Yeah. Does it make you second guess some of those picks, or time will tell?
No, second guessing does no good. But I was disappointed with a number of rulings that they made.
He's even more disappointed in what's happening at the southern border.
If you had a few minutes to speak with Kamala Harris about the immigration situation, what would you tell her? Because after all, Joe Biden put her in charge of the crisis. By the way, they don't even call it a crisis.
I'd say go back to what we were doing. It worked. Not so easy to get back there, however. I had to go through court cases, litigation. We had to win a lot. And stay in Mexico was a very big deal. And we got that, and we got all the other things, and now it's all been blown up. And you have millions of people coming into our country, just in case you're not aware of it. Millions of people. And many of those people come out of prisons. They allow them to come out of prisons and other places. What's happening on our border is beyond a crisis. And maybe they won't call it a crisis, but it's beyond a crisis.
During his re-election campaign, Trump warned voters that a President Biden would make major changes on the immigration front. He also warned evangelicals to not trust Biden when it came to key cultural issues.
They're being affronted on every single thing that they stand for and represent. When Biden went in, he didn't say all of the things that were happening. You look at religion, generally speaking, what's going on now with this administration. This was not what was discussed during debates and during anything else. I mean, nobody ever thought this was possible, not only on religion, on the border, on Second Amendment, on everything else you can think of, but including God and including life and including many other topics. This was never, nobody ever thought, this is a Bernie Sanders times 10. Nobody ever thought what's happening to our country could be happening to our country. And the evangelicals and Christians generally, you take a look at what's happening, Christians generally are feeling that way, and they're feeling that way very strongly. Much more so now, because now they're actually seeing things happen.
Indeed, conservative Christians have deep concerns about the direction of the country. The question now remains as to what impact Donald Trump will have in the upcoming elections, both next year and 2024. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Pat, the former president still wielding his influence on a wide variety of topics.
There's no question that he has a tremendous influence in the party, but I, for one, would prefer that we move on in terms of selection. And Ron DeSantis is a wonderful candidate, but, you know, the Republicans have some really superb candidates coming out in terms of the presidency. The Democrats really don't have anybody. They've lost severely in California and New York in terms of the prestige of their governors. And, you know, I was asking my producer about how many races were being targeted in the House, and he said, well, you're only guessing. I said, well, there are 5 seats will flip the control of the House of Representatives, and he said there are 57 House seats that are now being targeted. 57. And it looks like there are several seats in the Senate, especially Georgia and other places, where there might be a flip. But in terms of the presidency, nobody would have dreamed that what is happening to us would happen in terms of many, many initiatives that are being put forward by the Biden administration. And so coming up, it's so far away to speculate, but you wonder what would happen, and is there going to be a chance? Well, there's one of the things, you know, the Democrats put forward what was called H.R. 1, which would federalize elections. In the Constitution, the control of the electoral process was left in the hands of state legislatures. But H.R. 1 would federalize it. Now, Joe Manchin, who we've been touting and praying for, has put forth what looks like a compromise, but this might be one of those Trojan horses. It sounds so good, it's gaining a lot of support, but at the same time, it will still maintain federal control of the electoral process. And here in Washington, something's going to be happening, so let's go to John for more on that story.
That's right, Pat. A big test vote today in the Senate on the Democrats' massive election reform bill. It would be the biggest overhaul of U.S. voting procedures in a generation. Democrats say they want to make it easier to vote. Republicans, though, argue the bill would give the federal government control of elections, which should belong to the states.
In my view, SR 1 is the biggest power grab in the history of the country. It mandates ballot harvesting, no voter ID. It does away with the states being able to redistrict when you have population shifts.
Takes the election system in this country and federalizes it. So it's a federal takeover of our election system.
West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin has offered a compromise, but the bill is unlikely to get past Republican opposition. The White House, though, saying Monday it wasn't giving up.
Our effort, the president's effort to continue that fight doesn't stop tomorrow at all. This will be a fight of his presidency.
Democrats say Republicans are trying to hinder access to voting with new state laws. Earlier this year, the president blasted Georgia's new voting law.
This is Jim Crow on steroids, what they're doing in Georgia and 40 other states.
Fact checkers at the Washington Post called out President Biden for false claims over some of his attacks on the Georgia voting law. Well, turning now to health news. If you're wondering how to keep your brain healthy, you might consider some supplements. Experts recommended some key supplements to eat this, not that, including omega-3 fatty acids, which are also found in fatty fish. They're anti-inflammatory and good for mental health. B vitamins, which help support neurotransmitters to the brain and are good for your mood. Vitamin E, which works as an antioxidant and protects the brain, and amino acids, which also help influence our mood and feelings. And Pat, I understand you've been interested in amino acids for quite some time.
No idea how many. But you know, in order to get a perfect protein, you have to have 23 of the amino acids, and only meat has them. You know, so people go vegan. You have to combine the protein in corn, for example, and one other type of legume to get a perfect protein. So it takes 23 amino acids. But do I take a load of them? You better believe it. And I think it's very important.
Yeah, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We're fearfully and wonderfully made.
Well, our wonderfully made system needs a little food, and it needs protein, and it needs the right balance of omega. And I take a massive, there's something called Life Extension Mix, and they have so many vitamins in it, I can't remember them all. It's like a panel, you know. Somebody said, what supplements are you taking? And you give the doctor a couple of pages of them. So anyhow, hopefully it keeps us young.
It's working.